This is ACOFAE. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
This episode contains spoilers from the book Wicked by Gregory Maguire with mentions of Animal Farm, Outlander, and Blood and Chocolate. For full list, please see show notes.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, your weekly deep dive into the fantasy, literature, and fandoms that we love. I'm Laura Marie.
And I'm Jessica Marie.
And today we are discussing Wicked, the life and times of the Wicked Witch of the West by Gregory Maguire.
And I don't even know where to start. Because I know earlier this year we discussed Wicked Act 1 of the play. I had not seen Act 2 of the play yet. But this book was something. It was more than I expected. Even with the guidance of Laura Marie, with her saying, you know, just so you know, this is a very politically heavy book. And I was like, I got this. I've been doing politically heavy. But now that I have been in different canons of this storytelling with these characters, and they're all essentially canon. I mean, you're in and out and taking aspects of with the storytelling. I don't think I realized how politically centric it was. So the amount of notes that I took, and then I felt like, am I getting to this point where I'm just writing and I'm not like really digesting what is happening? Because there's like, even with the parents, when we kick it off right away, I'm like, why do we need to know all this? I'm really glad the Broadway musical glossed over this part. We didn't need to know any of it.
You're not alone. You're not alone. People really don't like this book. There has been okay, Jessica Marie. Now that you have read this book, can you imagine the panic and horror on booksellers' faces when mothers come with their little children and they say, "Here you go. We're going to read this together," or like, this is, she loved the movie so much, and of course this is what it's based on, and they have to be like, "Oh my God." Oh my God, what do I do exactly? Like, you have to be like, it's really different. It's really different, and kind of like drive that home. It is incredibly, incredibly different. Because
this isn't you had read this prior to us deciding to cover it for an episode. And per your usual episode coverage, you read this at least 2 times, and rightfully so, to keep us on track and to keep guiding us in the conversation. Because how old were you when you first read this?
Yeah, probably too young. Young, real young, real young. But you can read whatever you want. That's a privilege. So I did. And I read this way too young, and I didn't read it again. And there are other books in this series. And at one point I had them, but I didn't read them.
Was it one of those books that your mom or your grandma might have picked up for you, knowing that, this seems synonymous with The Wizard of Oz?
Sort of like the Grimoire. I don't know how it came to be. I just remember, I remember I had it. I remember the cover. It was like that old timey cover with the cutout in the middle. I had that. And it was just, I don't know. It was just one of those things. And it was one of those books where it was like, I knew that I was too young to read this. It was around the same age that I read The Vampire Armand. I was just like, I'm a little bit too young to be reading this shit, but I'm going to do it anyway.
The fact that you were aware, though, that you were like, maybe knowing that the Wicked Witch of the West has curly purple pubes isn't something that I should be reading, or that she's really hoping for a tongue between her thighs. And you're like, well, this is interesting. Haven't had that. We probably, when you're reading it, because again, I know you had shared with us in our pop culture poetry series when we were covering Act 1, you had shared that your mom had taken you to see the Broadway. So honestly, and I'm sure most parents do this, they're like, oh my gosh, here's the Broadway. Oh my gosh, here's the book. The book probably has more details. It does in a very specific way of the story that I'm already familiar with that we just saw a musical for.
Yeah. It is really safe to say that my mother did not read a lot of things before she gave them to me. So this was not like, this was parental approval, but this was not like, through actual like practical application of that. She just kind of probably handed this to me because I was quite young. But the musical, just that you bring up, the musical is a fantastic adaptation of this because, and I think, and I don't know, maybe this is a hot take. I do think that if you really love the musical, that this is kind of like required reading because it explains a lot of stuff, like the fucking time clock thing. That is the central, like, focal point of the musical the entire time. It's like right there staring at you the whole time, and they don't really address it. And you're just like, what is that? It's nice. The book is hard. The book is hard because maybe this is another hot take. I'm just out with all the hot takes today. I find the writing style difficult, and maybe no, because I'm going to say like maybe that's the audio, but no, it was difficult when I read this as a child too. And this time now I read it twice through audio, and the narrator is a man, an old man, and he knocked it out of the park. Honestly, this is difficult, and he did the best that he could, and it was great. But the writing style is difficult. It's just like stuff that is vital to understanding the story is woven throughout dialogue of like kind of nonsense or like monotony of like daily life sometimes. And you're just like, again, just like you said, like, why is this important? But there'll be like this like little chunk. You're like, oh, well, that's really important though. Actually, damn.
Yeah, because I feel like, there have been books that we've read where, especially if there's like maybe some spice involved in a scene, and we're like, you know what, like, okay, we get this part, we can maybe gloss over it because it's not adding to the storyline for us. But then there are some moments of books where you're like, okay, well, we know the plot is going to be in this part of the conversation. Then I think there are times that we've read and covered books on the podcast where we realized, especially if we were able to get through to, I mean, I know you pick up on it more since you're typically able to do that second and like sometimes even up to third read, that you could almost only read the dialogue and you still get the plot. But this, because like you said, it's so interwoven, you really can't glaze over anything. You have to, it might be in the conversation. It might be in the narration. The narrator was wonderful. I mean, I do feel like the way that he, shared the story, and maybe it's how it's written, it feels like storytelling. Like you're being told the story from like a grandparent or somebody older as opposed to just reading the story. I'm also wondering if the format might attribute to it because there's not necessarily chapters, there would be like a part 1 and then some subsections, but not necessarily a chapter 1. I co-read this through audio and ebook. I also have this physical copy signed by the author. Laura, I know you do too. And so we covered our bases with this book. So it was just maybe, and then there were times where I go, okay, we're starting another section, especially if I was listening. Nope, we're just into a new paragraph. So again, maybe that's a me thing, where if I was the author, that might have been like my break into, okay, now we're starting another part of this journey and quest that a lot of these characters are going on individually and some interwoven.
This is a big book. She is thick. Audio is 19 hours plus, and just in your hand, it's a heavy book.
It's heavy. Yeah. Like, it only says 400 something pages, which is honestly kids play for us sometimes. But it is like small print, very hefty, very 400. Hefty. And the themes, I feel like, talking about, some kids who are reading this younger, a lot of the political themes and conversations might not be being grasped right away. I mean, even adults who are all like, oh, I'm apolitical, I don't involve myself in politics. Well, I'm sorry if you're following 2025 politics, a lot of stuff, and this was written in the 90s, a lot of it, history repeats itself. And I know we'll get into it, and we talked about before recording, there are moments where Nessa Rose, I was like, did you take a play out of Animal Farm? This is very Animal Farm of you.
Oh, Nessa Rose. Nessa? We'll get there. We'll get to Nessa and the changes, the drastic, huge changes that Nessa's character underwent in the musical. And we will talk about that. But I think broadly speaking, before we get into this book and the themes of goodness and what is a soul, and like, is the body an outer reflection of goodness of the inside, and, animal rights, and what the slow stripping of rights looks like in front of a populace's eyes, and how that is managed, and how this man can crown himself emperor with like little to no resistance. And then we had, and then
everybody's like, well, how does that happen? And then here you are. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot going on, but Jessica Marie, you can see exactly what was pulled for the musical.
Oh, 100%. And I feel like, I think it's important to note that with the musical, it was clearly, it was created, and this was the inspiration. And you can see like, okay, well, this can do good. Like, I can pull this, I can take this, we can gloss over this. But even character development, like we were talking about, like, you think, you see Galinda, I feel like this book helped. I don't want to say helped. You see a level of depth in her more in this book than might not be portrayed, in fairness, in a 3-hour Broadway, which includes Act 1, Act 2, and an intermission. So, like, I understand that. So I do also think that when you were talking about the time clock, where if you had read this book prior, it's a nice little Easter egg for the reader. And I know we've talked about that on other episodes but it also doesn't take away from the story. If you don't, you could, like you said, you could be in the audience and be like, oh, what is that? But it also doesn't take away from the story of not knowing what it is. It just fleshes it out a little bit more by having that background. I mean, even when I think of the movie and people who in their discussions with Elphaba and Galinda's relationship, and it's very like, sapphic I say undertones in air quotes. But in this book, there are no undertones. It is canon. They have romantic love for each other also. And their friendship breakup-ish in this book is also like a it is a goodbye. And there is a moment where Glinda sees Fiyero and she has this like, oh my gosh, have you seen Elphaba? I'm so glad because it's 5 years later and there's still this longing that they have for each other. And even Elphaba shares with Fiyero at one point. She goes, defense mechanisms up. She put the wall up to emotionally detach herself from people because of the love that she had.
And that's again, there's no subtext. It's like right there on page. They traveled a week to the Emerald City, slept in the same bed every single night. Glinda dreams and misses it. Like, come on. It's on page. Lovely, lovely stuff. Also, on page is, again, a lot of Elphaba's childhood and her relationship with Frex and her mom and what it was like and going to school and her teeth. Her father is like fixated on why did she have such sharp baby teeth? Like she bit off the midwife's finger when she was born and had blood instead of milk as her first like liquid. Like little details like that. It's really interesting. And of course, this author has expanded on all of that, but we're only talking about this book right here. So I think the best way to do this, Jess, you tell me if I'm wrong, is to just kind of like tap in and out of this book and kind of like talk about the highlights, because it is, I will tell you, 22 pages of notes. Like, and I
we'll
think
get lost in our own notes.
we'll get lost in the sauce. So I think, just talking about the things that really, really stood out to us, would be the most expedient and interesting way to do this. How do we feel?
We love it. And I know something that, and we've talked about this in other books. I think most recently, Blood and Chocolate was how we both read that through audio. And then there were quotes that set up the book where we were just like, oh my gosh, we didn't know that from the audio, which really would have set up where the discussion is going. And but you had a physical copy, so you knew this. So I feel like you, because we mirrored that, I think we should continue to, you're so wonderful with leading us. We kind of set it up for this episode too, with the 3 quotes that we have at the beginning of this whole book. Okay, so the first one is by Daniel Defoe from A System of Magic. And it says, "'Tis very strange men should be so fond of being thought wickeder than they are."
Excellent, excellent. Quote number 2, Jessica Marie.
Okay, so quote 2 is from Leo Nikolavich Tolstoy. Sorry for butchering that. From War and Peace. And historical events, great men, so-called, are but labels that serve to give a name to an event. And like labels, they have the last possible connection with the event itself. Every action of theirs that seems to them an act of their own free will is in an historical sense not free at all, but in bondage to the whole course of previous history and predestined from all eternity. And then
Number 3.
Third one, which sets us up, is from L. Frank Baum from The Wonderful World of Wizard of Oz. And if those who don't know, Elphaba is named in honor of L. Frank Baum. Well, said the head, I will give you my answer. You have no right to expect me to send you back to Kansas unless you do something for me in return. In this country, everyone must pay for everything he gets. If you wish me to use my magic power to send you home again, you must do something for me first. Help me and I will help you. What must I do? Asked the girl. Kill the wicked witch of the West, answered Oz. And so begins our conversation.
Fantastic stuff. That really sets the tone of the book, and it is included in the audio copy, which is wonderful. Again, as Jess said, a lot of the times that is not the case, and that sucks because it really does just like take away from the story. But okay, so the Wicked starts with okay. the book starts with a prologue with the Elphaba watching the Yellow Brick Road and Dorothy and her companions, the Lion, the Tin Man, and the Scarecrow, and she overhears this group talking about her. And this is again, like setting the tone. What do these people, Dorothy and her companions, say about the Wicked Witch? They say that she was an abused child, that she was unlucky in love, that she was an addict, she's a lesbian. She's actually a man. She's a despot, and she is just evil, right? She's evil. That's like the most tangible thing. They're like, ooh, oh my gosh. And then, of course, there's a storm coming. Dorothy is afraid. She has her dog. And this is where the witch sees that Dorothy is wearing her sister's shoes. And she goes, what? Hadn't she earned those shoes? Those were hers.
And, and in fairness, right? Because we know that historically where those shoes are from, we know that they were given to her sister. We know that there's a lot of bitterness between her and her sister, because, Elphaba has eldest daughter syndrome, and it doesn't help the fact that her parents, or specifically her father, raised her as the favorite and always kind of bequeathed everything to her sister Nessa Rose. And so Elphaba was like, come on, damn it. And plus, because where we are at the prologue of this, we're kind of in quote unquote present day. So then we're in prologue, present day, and then we go to like the next section where we're, flashback to prior to when Elphaba was born. But there is conversations of Nessa saying like, yeah, you could have my shoes when I die. Mm-hmm. So now she knows that her sister died, and she's like, those are mine. And I feel like people who have sisters, and these are like the relationships that I've seen. Also, it's like, what are you doing wearing my shirt? What are you doing in my closet? Like, that's what this feels like. You took that from me. And now you have somebody else who has the thing that she said, like, I was told I could have that next. So, but it goes deeper for that with Elphaba, because where we are present is she is very isolated, and she, to her own accord, she has become a recluse, and she's really leaning into all of these titles that people have bestowed upon her.
Yes, she, flies the broom. She calls herself a witch. She drops the name Elphaba and just says witch. Which is something that the animals, tell her that they do earlier on in her life. It's really something. They also say, again, politics. They also say about Dorothy, or about Elphaba, Dorothy and her companions say that she's a champion of home rule of the Winkies. Just dropping that right here in the prologue. You're like, what? Okay. Great. Sure. All right. And then we jump into part one, which is, we're in Munchkin Land in Rush Margins, and it's called The Root of Evil. And this is, the Elphaba is, about to be born. It's the day that she's born, and her dad is a preacher, Frax, who Jess is not a fan of, and he goes to preach against the dragon time clock and the dwarf and the show, and it's evil and fornicators, all these things. And we have an entire section of Frax and Melina. Melina. Before Elphaba is born, and then dealing with Elphaba being green. And we know a sliver of that from the musical, but this is flushed out.
So expanded on. And it's also really interesting because Elphaba's mom, she was a lonely woman because her husband, Frax, he was a traveling minister. He was a traveling reverend. He was preaching the holy word throughout Oz. And so she was lonely a lot. So she would take male companions, physically and not. Just sometimes she's like, I just want to take care of somebody for dinner. But one of those people wound up being Turtle Heart, who winds up being Elphaba's father biologically.
Nessa's father.
Nessa's father, sorry.
The wizard is Elphaba's father.
Yes. Sorry. But her dad doesn't know this. They all just kind of form this throuple situation unintentionally, but because her father has an emotional attachment, but they all, her mom's just with him. We're getting a lot of background. We're getting, Elphaba's being isolated. There's a lot of talk about her parents, like, I try to kill her every which way. She's just weird looking. And Nanny, who has been in their lives since prior to the girls, both Elphaba and Nessa Rose, were born, because she has been with the mom forever too. And she calls the mom out on her bullshit too. She's like, are you sure? Are you sure? Who's the dad? It's okay. Just tell me so I know what I'm walking into. She's very much not like, oh, no judgment here. Very much judgment, but tell her the truth. And Nanny continues to be a staple throughout the whole book, which is something that I do love. But you get a little bit of flashbacks of how Elphaba was raised, how isolated she was. Part of the isolation just came because, there was one time that her mom put her basically in like a bouncy swing so she could go have sex with someone. So, it was really interesting that Nanny had to force her parents to realize, hey, you are being neglectful even though you physically see her. She needs to be socialized. Just because you want to isolate and you all do not like the outcome of her physical appearance doesn't mean that, how you have these certain societal expectations, but you're not sharing how she should be functioning in society. So Nanny really took a lead on Elphaba's upbringing, like we do see in the musical.
Yeah. And kind of a through line throughout this entire book is Yakel. And Yakel starts off like here, because Yakel is the one that gives Nanny the 9-month supply of pills for Melina that she takes when she's pregnant with Nessa Rose. And Nessa Rose is born in the book without arms, which is just way different. It's way different than the musical. And so her whole personality, her whole life, her whole living situation is that she doesn't have arms and she needs help doing absolutely everything. And because of that, and there's a really interesting line that really stuck with me. And not when I was a child, but like this read too. It was, well, no wonder Nessa Rose is so devout. She can't touch anything. She can't touch anything. So why would belief in something that she can't touch be a detriment to her? That's her entire life. So it was just like, oh, it's this other perspective. And that, that's really interesting too. And then later on when Elphaba is, again taken into sanctuary with the nuns in the nunnery, that's also Yakel. And Yakel is working sometimes for, sometimes with, sometimes against the dwarf and the dragon time clock. So those two opposing forces are always at play, kind of in the background, and sometimes directly interfere in Elphaba's life, and sometimes are just on the fringes. But is something that I find really interesting, because Yakel also had a prophecy that she tells Nanny that is Melina's gonna have 2 daughters. Destiny is she's gonna have 2 daughters, and there's greatness for both of those 2 daughters. And Nanny was like, well, I'm not gonna tell her that because she wants sons. But all right, good to know. We'll store in Nanny's head. And I find that to be very interesting and something that's kind of lost in the musical. But again, there's so much going on in this book. And of course you can go into more detail into the book too.
Well, and doesn't she even have this quote unquote prophecy saying it could be good or bad? Because, and it kind of does go that way. And I feel like you have Elphaba, again, because of how the Wicked Witch of the West is depicted. We really don't have, again, in the, 1940s version of the Wizard of Oz movie, we didn't have all of this background on Nessa Rose, who in the movie, again, is called the Wicked Witch of the East, but we're like, we don't know how or why. And
or
we
who,
get that. Or
honestly.
who. Like, we just know, you know, she says, who killed my sister, who killed the Wicked Witch of the East? Was it you? And then we have this story where we understand what her wickedness was, which was actually wicked, as opposed to Elphaba just having the title of Wicked Witch of the West and just leaning into, again, the names that were created for her, but never actually was. Because even when we meet Sarima, who, again, different from the musical, is Fiero's wife in this movie, and it's going to be spoilers for the book and musical, I guess, an eventual widow, she is very much like, well, if you don't feel comfortable telling me your name yet, she hasn't pieced everything together. We have to give you a name, and I need our children to respect you, which is also very traditional in a lot of cultures where we're going to give you a title. We're going to call you like Auntie Guest. And then it becomes an Auntie Witch. Like, we're going to give you our own nickname. And I think that is also something like, why she was very much like, why are they calling me witch? Like, that's just, but then she leans into it and she doesn't take anything negative about it, because also, again, depicted in society, being a witch or studying anything pagan or following that spirituality, there's nothing wrong with it either. But because of the sense of the book and the themes and what they were being pre-told and how Nessa Rose was, it kind of is an ongoing thing.
Yeah, well, religion. There's so much religion in here. There's the pleasure faith. There's TikTokism. There's the unionist faith. Like, there's the royalists. Like, there's so much going on. And so, like, all of the politics that are happening in the background is so important to, like, the movement of the story, which is crazy because you really think, like, Elphaba is, like, the driving force of the story, and she is. But really, to me, it's like kind of what the wizard is doing that kind of like forces Elphaba to make her moves. Because it, you know, if she needs to go to Shiz, and once she's at Shiz, her eyes are open to everything that's going on because she's not isolated in the backcountry anymore. You know, she's like exposed to everything. She immediately sees like the injustice and the corruption and the racism and the intolerance and where it's going to go. And you know, she's, while also cultivating a found family. And you can see, again, exactly the pieces that were picked from this to go into the musical. But this, like, that section, like the Shiz section, is really the only time, besides her love affair, that Elphaba had any sort of fun.
Yeah. Well, and then, like, learn to trust, right? And again, we see this in the musical, is that she was isolated her whole life. It was something that she was comfortable with because it's what she knew. She did slowly socialize, but then when she goes to Shiz, again, different in this book, she goes to Shiz before Nessa Rose. She goes to Shiz on her own accord for an education. And also different in this book, we do see Galinda, who her path of study is like, oh, I don't know if I want to do sorcery. Maybe that's not going to be for me. They don't have this necessary disdain towards each other. It was just, you're different. I'm unfamiliar with you. So I think there's something to be said there. And also I feel like you see and you hear in the book, Galinda's, like, not even her subconscious, like what she's thinking when Madame Moorible is saying things, and you constantly hear her internal dialogue saying, that doesn't seem right. That seems a little bit off. Why is she having that's a microaggression towards Elphaba? Why is she talking about things being bright and light, knowing that that's not where Elphaba is clearly green. Like, it's a direct hit. But at the same time, Galinda is in this she's also in a new environment and understands that Madame Moorible is in this position of power, and being liked is a level of currency. And she talks about, being in boarding school, and she's like, oh, of course I need to make friends with these people because these people have these connections. Like, she's constantly in her own head, but knowing what's quote unquote right and wrong.
Well, Galinda, I really love book Galinda because Galinda is, for one, bullied by her friends and says, you know what? Fuck all of you. Fuck all of you. I'm never gonna trust any of you again, and really takes Elphaba and Bach and all of them under, they become the found family. Galinda too comes to school with intense distrust and I guess racism, right, towards the animals, because she meets Dr. Dilliman right away. And she's like, I am disinclined to talk to you. And he's like, I'm a professor at school. She's like, I am forced to go against my training and speak to you, sir. How are you doing? And she has, and he does all these kind things to her. And she's just really butting heads against her own internal prejudice against animals, especially in a social academic learning situation. And she carries that with her throughout her time at Shiz. Another thing about Galinda in the book is that she doesn't suck at sorcery. She's not bad at it. She's the one that enchants Nessa Rose's shoes to make her walk with perfect balance. And it lasts for years and years and years and years and years. So I find that to be interesting as well. Again, I am just a Galinda fan. I just love her. Again, and she changes her name in the book, Galinda in solidarity with Dr. Dilliman, who was brutally murdered by Gromit, the TikTok machine, which is something that's essentially cut out of the musical, is the animatronics and the automatons as little servants, which is, I guess, fine. But it does kind of give it adds a little bit more sinister atmosphere to everything. Just knowing that, cause Elphaba says, they can hear you. He is, Madame Moorible's creature. He will go back and report what he hears and sees to her. You have to be very careful. While we're talking about this and the Shiz section in particular, just tell me about Bach, because he's different here.
So before I read the book, I saw that there was a Bach chapter. Again, you had screenshotted me what kind of the layout looked like. And I'm thinking we're going to go back, again, different pretenses. We're going to have different POVs throughout the whole book. And it's not so much that, because again, the formatting of this is not, I'll say traditional format and layout of a book. But Bach is, I thought he was going to be annoying. And once I went into this, and I knew that the musical wasn't based on this, or it was loosely inspired, but it wasn't copy paste. Bach is tolerable. I mean, he does some Peep and Tom stuff where I'm come on. He also he's working towards a friendship with everybody. He does have a romantic interest with Galinda initially, but he also comes away from getting to know people. And he is and at one point it says on paper, the romantic interest has subsided. He doesn't think of her like that anymore. It really is about forming friendships, because even at one point when they're at Shiz, Galinda is with her frenemies, more or less, at a lake house. And one of the frenemies wrote to Elphaba saying, oh my gosh, we wish you were here. We miss you so much. But wrote it as if it was Galinda. And Elphaba's I'm going to go see my girlfriend, basically. I miss my best friend. Because also at this point, they've gone through a couple years at Shiz. They've remained roommates throughout and dorming together the entire time. And they both are not embarrassed to speak to each other in public, but the frenemies use that against them. And Galinda's very much did you think I would write that? And Alpha was yes, Yes, I do. You do say those things to me. That is very much our relationship. But in that process, they still cannot be seen with, people of the other gender, and they have to have escorts. And that's also like, but do you have a male escort? Because that can be dicey on this trip. So then it winds up being a full trip of Bach, of Elphaba, some of their other friends, and they go up to this lake house for like the last couple days of summer before a new school year starts. And it becomes, everybody's excited, everybody's flirting. It's the last couple days of summer, and everybody's just kind of like, once we get over the frenemy situation of like, Galinda's friends aren't actually her friends. They're people that she knows who like to bully her. They kind of just like lean into it, and then they're like, okay, back to school. But the core of it all is Bach continues to be a constant, because he even makes another reappearance later in the book, years after graduation. I think we're at like between an 8 and 12 year timeline, because you have 3 years and then you have 5 years and then there's another 7-year jump. So yeah.
Yeah. And Bach has his own storyline too. Like, he's with the boys. He's with the dudes. They go to the brothel. They see some wild shit in the brothel with like crazy stuff. And one of them never recovers from it. Bach sneaks in and sets up.
Oh my God, the tiger stuff. I was like, what am I reading?
The tiger stuff, like, yeah, that whole thing. But that's Yakel. That's Yakel's brothel. That's the dwarf. Again, like, Yakel is moving behind the scenes here, and it is. Bach has his own storyline, and backing up exactly what you said, Jess, is that the line on paper where Bach is like, I was, kind of in love with like this new timid version, this new arrival Galinda, this thinking, active, like other Galinda. I don't love her. I respect her as a friend. Like, I want that relationship with her. And, that's in a completely like non-creepy, self-aware kind of way, which just is, I guess character assassination for the musical, because he's such like a fucking creep in the musical. But here, besides joking about his suicidal wife, he's just like this normal, like nice kind of guy, where he plays like very concerned, because Elphaba's she's a little bit out of it towards the end of the book. She's like, her mental state is not great, and he's there and he's like, Elfie, like come on, let's talk. She's like, put the knife down. He's like, you got crazy eye, Elfie. Like, talk to me. Like, what is going on?
And Bach taps into a certain level of Elphaba too, because he was one of the original kids that she had matriculated with to socialize, and she doesn't remember a lot of people. It's clearly like she's had CPTSD, isolating her traumas from growing up. And even when they initially reintroduce each other at Shiz, Bach is very much like, of course I remember you. Also, you're green. How could I not? Like, it was just and it wasn't a judgment thing. He was very much like, why wouldn't I? You're green. You're the most memorable person I know. And she's offended by that. And even Galinda's very, like, I feel like her relationship with Bach at Shiz is it's not the Broadway version, obviously, that we get, where in the musical, it's very like, oh, dismissive, thanks, like, let me use you, like, how can I make this work for me? Whereas this, she develops the friendship. She does want to take time to speak with him. Don't be offended. Like, she's clearly like going through some shit. It's not a you thing. It's a her thing. Try not to take it personal.
Also, no love triangle between Galinda, Elphaba, Fiyero. None. Completely created for the musical. Here on paper, they are totally platonic throughout their school days, and they don't pick up until after much later.
Yeah, 5 years after they 5 years after she splits from Fiyero, because she also leaves Shiz before graduating. Yes. So that's also the timeline that we're working at, because when we are reintroduced to Fiyero later in the book, he says it's been 3 years since he's graduated, but it's been 5 years since Elphaba left Galinda post their Emerald City trip. And Galinda stayed, obviously, becomes Saint Galinda, also keeps a very platonic relationship with Fiyero. She winds up marrying one of their friends from the friend group, Crope, and has a kid. And he's even like, I can't believe this. I went to college with you and now you're married with a kid. This is kind of crazy, but like, I'm also married because I'm a prince and have a bunch of kids. And by the way, my marriage was arranged with a child bride. Yeah.
Yes. I mean, yes to all of it. And it is in particularly very interesting because Galinda like has all of this and she sees Fiyero and the first thing she does when she sees Fiyero is like, oh my God, have you seen Elphaba at all? Like, do you have any news about Elphaba? Because Elphaba leaves Galinda high and dry on the train. Glinda's like, I saved you a seat. I've had to fight all these bitches to save a seat for you. Sit the fuck down on this train. It's please. And Elphaba, do you have any food? And Elphaba just like throws a bunch of cheese and apples and stuff at her and is like, this will have to tide you over. And then it's like, goodbye forever. And Galinda's like, what the fuck, man? Because something that I really love that is here in the book is Madame Moorible recruiting Elphaba, Nessa Rose, and Galinda to be the adepts of the country. I love that. It's
good, but I feel like that's exactly where Elphaba was like, I'm out, because you can see obviously we see it in the musical too, but it's that moment where as the reader, you're like, holy shit, like they're paving. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, you can't talk about, even though I'm talking to all three of y'all and you're here and you're clearly aware, I'm going to try to paint this picture of we're in this super cool secret society that only we know all of this about, but you also cannot talk to each other about it at all of what you do know, because this is the control and how we like, it's the control and the optics and the propaganda and it's everything that comes with the type of politics and government that their regime that they're operating under.
And Elphaba asks Nessa Rose and Galinda several times on different occasions, like, do you remember that? Do you remember that? Because Elphaba really feels that they were under a legitimate spell because she was able to like fight it off a little bit, but Nessa and Galinda fainted. Like they were thinking about it a little bit and then immediately fainted. And the Amas were like, Yeah,
because isn't there also a timeline that Moorible is like, and then in a year's time we'll come back, because she gives them a proposition.
Yeah, we'll talk about it again.
Yeah, we'll talk it about, and I will, what, here's what we're laying out, and tell you what, this is a lot for you to carry. It's really heavy. I'll give you a year's time to decide, and then we'll reconvene. And Elphaba was very much like, bitch, I'm out. I am out. I do not put me into any of this. And this is also where she's like, I don't want to be involved in all of these conspiracies. So she fucks off from Shiz also. And at the same time, she is, in the time that, we flash forward to for 5 years later, she's slowly becoming a radical activist planning crazy acts of, vigilante acts towards other people. I guess that's, I mean, I'm trying to censor ourselves and like not have the just CIA under us.
It's big T. Let's just call it big T.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah,
yes,
she's a big
acts
T.
Of big T.
Yeah, acts of big T. And she's good at it. And she conducts this like love affair with Fiyero, as when they're adults. And he's like, I should really go back to my wife. Nah. And just stays with Elphaba for months and months and months while she gets deeper and deeper into this big T network. And it is And he eventually dies. I mean, this is not, he is killed. And the wizard later says like, oh yeah, no, we were fucking watching you. We had eyes on that. He went back to that apartment and we were like, bam, 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 and took him out. And Elphaba loses it at that point. She goes into this like big thing of grief. Shocker here, I guess. Elphaba, unbeknownst to her, is pregnant with Fiero's son. She gives birth under like coma, kind of. It's kind of like that Outlander situation where Claire comes back and like, she gives, it's that kind of thing. She gives birth to Lear, and she doesn't really have any motherly feeling towards Lear. She doesn't remember giving birth to Lear, but Lear is Fiero's son. And that is its own like kind of storyline that Elphaba has to go through. But Elphaba is radicalized in the book the same way that she's radicalized in the musical. And that is through Dr. Dillamon, his experiences, his teachings, his views of the world, his predictions on how the world is going to go and what all of this means. And him basically just snapping his fingers in front of everybody's eyes and being like, hello, are you not connecting the dots on what all of this all means? Because, but that's also like something that happens in college. So I do like really love that.
Yeah, I was going to say that because I feel like that also happened with Galinda, where she's having like this interaction on the train with Dr. Dillamon at first. And then again, you see her questioning things and she's like, that doesn't make sense. It's college that really hones these, I don't even want to say critical thinking, but thinking outside of how you've been taught for your formative years and feeling safe to ask these questions and not judged. And that is what is happening. And Dr. Dillamon, I mean, you have people who are like, oh, well, it doesn't affect you. You have the question that well, that's not affecting you. And he goes, okay, but what about my kids? They're like, oh, you're married? That's not what I said. You don't know my personal life. Mm-hmm. But what happens after? Yes, I might be in the safe group right now of capital A animals, but there's more than just me. How is it impacting this other sect of species, of people in our community? Why is that okay? Why this is what we need to be questioning? And again, I think of how this book was written in the 90s and how we're reading it, now November 2025, and how it is still so applicable to current events.
Yes. And that's kind of, a marker of good literature too. It's just like constantly and forever relevant. So that is also, something to be said. And Fiero gets to the point of radicalization as well when he sees just a family isolated and separated and brutally beaten in front of children, in front of his eyes. And he's like, what are we going to do about this? And the cafe owner is like, turn away. And Fiero is like, I am so sick. I can't like deal with this. And then he eventually dies. But after that, Elphaba goes into the nunnery. She gives birth to Lear. Yakel is there through the nunnery, kind of guiding her and teaching her and telling her that she needs to get the fuck out of there and go live her life and make amends to Serena, who is Fiero's widow. You need to go deal with that, which puts Elphaba on to like a big section of the rest of the book, which is just like living her life with Fiero's widow and children.
Who doesn't even know? She's like, I kind of suspected that my husband was probably cheating on me.
With Galinda.
But it's Galinda. He's always talked about this other person, Saint Galinda, Glinda, but she's Saint Glinda at this point. But I just need to tell you she's like, I'm asking you, don't talk to me about my husband because like, I don't want to go through the grief right now. And Elphaba is very much like she needs somebody to grieve about Fiero with. Obviously, she's not wanting to disclose the affair. And she's like, I'm going to win you over as my friend.
And which is really interesting and which is another thread woven throughout this story. There's one of guilt, there's purpose, destiny, love.
And they kind of have a co-parenting situation through this of like, and it's another level of female friendships and the community that we create for ourselves, because even though she kind of went there for one reason, you have Sarima and his family, Fiyoro's family, who they're raising their kids together.
There is, though, this thing that happens, which is forgiveness is denied because our widow will not hear about it. She won't hear it, Elphaba. The forgiveness that Elphaba came there looking for and that she deeply, deeply needs is denied her. And while she is able to kind of work through it, she's not able to achieve forgiveness. And that is kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back in the end of the book, when Dorothy is like, I actually came here to say, I am so sorry for killing your sister. And Elphaba is like, okay. What? I can't do this. I can't do this. Are you shitting me? You to me, but not me to anyone else. It's just this cycle, this self-loathing kind of cycle, but also this pent up, just this, this emotional release that hasn't been able, to give head. And it's just she's so tense.
I think the social, you saying the self-loathing is hitting the nail on the head, because she lives with that. It is a constant thought that she is the reason that Fiyoro died. She is the reason he was murdered. Yes. And there's a loss of control in that whole situation. And she can't, even if she's seeking forgiveness from Fiyoro's widow, she can't even have forgiveness for herself, because even if Fiyoro's widow, Sarima, forgives her, that doesn't change that she's going to still sit with that self-loathing that she's the reason he's dead.
And Serena still kind of clings to this hope that Fiyoro might be alive because they never found his body. And it is a sign of Elphaba's kind of plunge into delusion a little bit, where she's like, oh, well, maybe he's the Scarecrow. Maybe the Scarecrow is Fiyoro and he's coming to me in disguise. Maybe that's it.
Elphaba listened to ACOFAE podcast, because we're always like, no head, not dead. And in fairness, but there's always an exception to the rule. And this is kind of that situation. But Yakel, being the driving force that pushes Elphaba to go seek this redemption with Fiyoro's widow in a Winky country, but later, that's kind of a slur, Dorothy. Don't call us Winkies. She's like, oh my God, which is funny when in the musical where he's like, Winky country, it's the whole thing. You're just like, whoa, okay, you're okay, buddy. But Elphaba is here to go through a lot of to kind of really, this is her castle. This is where it all ends, in the West here, but to lean into, just as you said so well in the beginning, her persona as a witch. On her journey here, she picks up the monkey, she picks up the bees, she picks up the dog, she picks up all her crows, she picks up all of these companions, all of these familiars. She has all of these experiences while she's traveling out to the castle, and then she gets there and she raises her son there with all of Fiyoro's children. She murders one of Fiyoro's children, but bygones, bygones. I like how she's like, and I don't even feel bad about it.
I don't feel bad about it. Fuck him.
Yeah, manic.
Yeah, fuck him. But it's also here where Elphaba teaches the monkey how to talk. It's where she stitches wings onto the monkey and all of his progeny. It's where eventually, and why Yakel sent her there, she finds the Grimoire, and we learn how the Grimoire got here, who gave it there, and Serena's just like, yeah, I just threw it up here. It's whatever. He never said I couldn't read it. He just gave it to me, whatever. Of course, that is an interesting story that the wizard kind of backs up later. He's like, I was sent here to find it. Where is it? You got to give me that shit. Cause that was sent here by this other guy, and I got to get it and give it back. And We gotta go. I got things to do. And that conversation happens later. But this section, which is a large section of the book, is Elphaba kind of learning how to be a witch, learning how to be, back into society after the shock of Firo's death, after the shock of, these failed Big T attempts, and the, collapse essentially of the society that she knew, because when she reintroduces herself back into society, when Frex calls her and she goes to Nessa Rose, who has seceded her territory from the wizard, and she is a little dictator in her own right over Munchkinland, and Frex is like, Elphaba, help, your sister's taken over a piece of the country.
Which also really bothers me as an eldest daughter, because of course you gotta call in the big guns to get shit done. Of course you're calling me. Also, that has been how it has their relationship their entire life, that the father put on her because she was so limited and she needed a caretaker. She didn't have it couldn't just be nanny. And even when Nessa Rose eventually comes to Shiz, everyone's going to be like, they're like, oh my gosh, you didn't tell us you had a sister. And Elphaba is very much I didn't want to. And y'all are going to hate her. I know she's annoying, but y'all are going to realize that it's not just a sister relationship. You are not going to like her. And again, this is going to be another situation that falls on me, that I have to take care of her while I'm here. So, and it's another thing that her dad's like, hey, can you come fix this? What? No, you gave it to her. I stepped back. I know what? It was supposed to be mine. Another thing, just like the shoes, they were supposed to be mine, and you gave it to her. I don't know. Maybe I'm just at a different point in my life right now. I would just be at one point I would be fine, I'm going to come over and fix it. Now I'm going to be no, even you wanted it so bad. Go. You made your bed. Go deal with it. This is what you wanted. This is what you voted for.
And he essentially begs her over and over and over again. It's about leadership, Elphaba. She's not a good leader. She's too religious. She's too fanatic. It's not going to work. She has a bunch of angry, people here. She's going to resort to the basest way to keep them in check, which is fear and executions. That's going to happen. I need you. Step in. And Elphaba's like, fuck. Pop, 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 pop. No. And she doesn't. And Nessa Rose, of course. And then we kind of fall into the Wizard of Oz plot, because, they'll say, what is that noise? What is that noise? No one will know what that noise is, but it was this destructive tornado that blew through Munchkinland, that left specific things untouched, and, dropped a house directly on Nessa Rose as she was giving a speech in the square at an opening. It's a whole thing. And Galinda was there because her husband's a bigwig doing charity, and she was there. It's this big side. She was close, this whole thing. And then we kind of get on track. And this is, again, I really like Book Glinda, because Book Glinda, clocks the political situation, and she's like, okay, I got to get these shoes out of here. These shoes are going to become like a point, and I need to remove them from this situation before it explodes into massive political unrest. So she fucking cements them to Dorothy's feet and is like, go bitch, go walk right now, get out of here, go. And I will try to fix all of this. Right?
You go do that while I kind of
I deal
hunker
with this.
Down. Yeah.
Yeah. I deal with this. And that's a lot of fun. And, we have a funeral, and that's where Glinda and Elphaba are reunited, and they have a fight. They have a fight about it. And Elphaba is like, you had no right to give away the shoes. And Glinda's like, I didn't know you fucking wanted them. You didn't want them when we were kids. I didn't know you wanted them now. I didn't know about this situation. I need you to look at the bigger picture about what is going on and realize that those shoes are going to be a political tool. And Elphaba is like, I need you to get your head out of your ass and realize that you just sent them straight to the wizard who is going to use them as a political tool for a different reason. And Glinda is like, well, fuck, if I can't win anyway, just go get him yourself.
I just love their relationship, because even though they are going back and forth, there is still such a love there. If they wouldn't be so worked up if it wasn't. And I think it's also a testament to the relationship that they have / had, that you can be that direct. I think that's just like something overall that's not, I don't think people appreciate directness and confrontation in relationships and friendships and every form of it. So I did like that scene.
Well, Glinda cementing the shoes to Dorothy. Dorothy says later, like, I would give you my shoes if I could, but the wizard tried to take them and they wouldn't come off. My feet are so sweaty. You would not imagine. Just take them off of me and they don't come off. And I just love that Glinda was like, nothing comes off.
Goes to show that her sorcery wasn't bad. She was never a bad sorceress.
She was never a bad sorceress. I just really like that. I also like, and of course this is like, a male author writing all these female characters, but it gets a little bit weird a lot of times, but specifically I like how he talks about, how Glinda has aged and how Elphaba has aged, and like how they still have this like inner quality that makes them them, even though like the years have gone by and they still like recognize that like spark in each other. I really enjoyed that. But Elphaba says like that was the last time we would see each other. That was it. And if I had known, I would have done something. But I didn't. And, and Elphaba, essentially goes and like follows Dorothy on her journey. She goes and she murders Madame Moorible, of course,
as she should.
As she should. And of course they say like Madame Moorible was already dead, but like prove it. And she goes and she confesses to Avric and everything, but little detours. And then she just follows Dorothy for a bit, sees her go into the Emerald City with the wizard, and is like, all right, fine. Goes back home to the tower, and Fiero's family sees that they have all been taken prisoner by the wizard's soldiers, and only Nanny and Lear are left, and is like, well, all right, fuck, they're coming to get me. Lear comes with the soldiers' gossip that they're coming to kill Dorothy has to come kill Elphaba, because that's the only way that the wizard will send him home. That, of course, that quote goes back to the very beginning of the book, and this is the end of the book. We like that. We're setting the tone. But then Elphaba is just like, essentially sends, and this, this is sad, sends all of her familiars out because she gets like very deep in her delusion here. She's like, oh, well, I'm afraid of the scarecrow because he's like this, this pagan like token. She's like, maybe it's Fiero, come home to his family, Killyjoy, the dog, go sniff and go bring your master home. And then the woodsman who was cursed by Nessa Rose, kills all of the dogs. She sends the crows. All of the crows are killed. She sends all of the bees. The bees end up dying. Dorothy steps on the queen. Like, and Elphaba says like everything of mine that you touch, you kill. Like, what is it? Everybody says you're so holy because they relate her to the child monarch Osmond, who is like a child who's put in sleep. It's this whole other backstory about the wizard. But
oh yeah, where her father is the regent.
Yeah, that's like that whole thing.
Through this, it was also again watching The Wizard of Oz and then seeing Wicked on Broadway. It was another thing when I realized that the Tin Man was not Bach. Oh, like spoiler, everyone. But we already know that there's spoilers. The Tin Man was not Bach in the book. It was an actual and also Nessa let power, absolute power corrupts absolutely situation. because again, she was, with Munchkin Land, we know this, that she was like, oh, we're going to rise up, we're going to have a revolution. And then how quick that became for something that she ran like a dictatorship and ruled with that. So when people were coming to her, I do appreciate where some lady was like, my husband's cheating on me with the maid, do something about it. Nessa said, bet. So I feel like she picked and chose who she wanted to set as an example for others to rule with fear.
Yes. And so the Tin Man is the woodsman that Nessa cursed here, and he was the guy. I think his name's Tim. I'm not sure. I don't know. And he's him. The Scarecrow is nobody and nothing. He kind of dissolves into straw and air. There's nothing there. He kind of just like reforms. And the lion, of course, is the Cowardly Lion. That's the same as the musical. And Elphaba is like, well, why are you mad at me, my guy? I saved you. And the lion is just like.
Yeah, he just hates for the sake of hating. Honestly, like there is no reason. And she's questioning that too, which is like, this is also where it's like, okay, yes, at the end of the book, Elphaba is very much in her Delulu era, but you keep telling somebody, it's weird because at one point she's leaning into all of these names, right? And she's like, I don't believe it. I'm just entertaining them. But then at some point, because she is not in a great mental health space, she's truly believing these like, well, if they keep telling me I'm wicked, I guess I am wicked. Oh, they keep telling me I'm this, I guess I am. And it eats away at her. Yeah. And until it just all goes up in smoke, right? Dorothy shows up. Everybody in the house, Nanny and Lear and the monkey, work together and separate the group. So inside the castle is only Dorothy and the lion. They then separate them again after shenanigans where it's just Elphaba and Dorothy in the tower room. And through circumstance, like Elphaba's really angry, like the broom starts to spark, the broom starts to catch on fire. Dorothy's like, oh my God, and like throws a bucket of water on it, and Elphaba just kind of fades away. Just kind of, And that's something that I also think is interesting because even though this is the book, it's still left like, did she use her like it's left ambiguous, right? Like, did she actually melt? Because this whole time since we've had from her birth was she was so anti-water. She doesn't bathe. Even Fiyero was like, oh, she doesn't bathe. She just uses oil. And everybody was like, Fiyero?
How do you know that?
How do you know that? And, but we also don't have any confirmation that she is allergic to water and water does make her melt. We just know she had affinity against it. Have you ever tried to get a baby in a pool and put their head under? They're going to cry too. Nobody knows. So I do feel like the writer, the way he ends it, it's the way the end of the musical ends. Did she melt? Did she die? Because Lear comes to see her and he's like, there's nothing here. And we know that Dorothy finds a magical elixir in its place. And she returns that to the wizard. And he's like, hey, that's the stuff that I gave that woman, Melina, 30-something years ago.
Yep. And he's like, shit, I'm just gonna
piece the fuck out of my eyes. Yeah.
Bye. Bye, buddy. Have fun. And then it's like, and then nobody knows what happened. The wizard left. And then Dorothy, is she still there? Some say that she never left. Some say she found the mythical sea, all of this stuff. And then, several times throughout the story, there has been a story within a story about a witch and what happened to the witch and like, did she ever come out? And the ending is not yet. And that's how this book ends too. It's like, what happened to the witch? Did she ever come out? And the ending is not yet. And that's how it ends. And what an experience. What an absolute experience. Again, I think it makes the musical that much richer. I think it really fleshes out the characters. Of course, Galinda is my girl. So you knew I already fucked with this. But it is such a different different thing to digest than the movie, than the musical. And I am so excited for part 2 of the movie, obviously, but I have to tell you, I was more excited to watch Jessica Marie watch part 2 when we all went to go see it for my birthday, which was a surprise to me. And I think it won't be a surprise to anybody to learn that Jessica Marie wept.
So, like, ugly crying, sobbing in public to see this for the first time. And, when you get into that space of you start crying and then it just doesn't stop. That's kind of what happened in Act 2. And really towards the end of Act 1, definitely in Act 2, because then Act 2, even if the sobbing and weeping stopped, it was just a steady flow of tears throughout the whole thing. It was lovely. I still can't get over the fact that you were like, where are we going? When there's like signs everywhere, there's tractor trailers with like, Wicked is right here. It was such a fun surprise for you because I know how much the story and these relationships mean to you specific. So I thought to see it again, to see it in different ways, because I feel like we all know this story of these characters. And they're all canon in very different ways because the book is canon. This Wicked pre-telling and crossover with Dorothy is canon, and so is the musical, and so is the original by L. Frank Baum. So I think it's to see it grow into what it has become. It's another thing that I know we discuss on our Thankful episode, because this episode's coming out week of release, week of like part 2 release. This episode is coming out November 17th, and our Thankful episode, we talk about it next week. That comes out on November 24th. Having another sense of community. And I know it's always something that we love to explore when we're discussing fandoms, and this is just another extension of that.
Absolutely. And I do want to point out that I didn't notice because I finally didn't have to drive and I finally didn't have to take care of anybody. And I finally
you get to be a passenger princess and not worry about anything. And it was so amazing to just turn my brain off. And that was such a treat in and of itself.
But watching you absolutely crumble at Act 2 was just such a wonderful highlight. And it's something that I'm really looking forward to. Not only in part 2 of the movie, but we will be covering part 2 of the musical again for our pop culture poetry series that we have ongoing here at ACOFAE, because the music, these lyrics, the story is so important. And there are so many different formats, and we love the story. So let's celebrate them in all the formats that we have, while also lifting up and praising live theater, physical media, audio is reading, all of these things.
And making live theater accessible through a screen adaptation format, because prior to, it's expensive and not everybody can travel, and not all of these shows and these Broadway performances travel to your city either. And even when you do, they're not inexpensive. So accessibility for everything, accessibility for all. And here is another plug that if you are in the New York area, specifically New York City, you could go to the New York Public Library and you can see recordings of the live performances of Broadway shows. So support your libraries and see if your local library has access to that as well. But with that being said, feel free to follow us at ACOFAE Podcast on Instagram. We're also both on TikTok, ACOFAE Laura and ACOFAE Jessica. Feel free to rate us 5 stars on whatever your listening platforms are. And we look forward to hearing from y'all next time. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.